So
There we
where I was
go.
going with this is the propaganda is there, right? And a lot of the propaganda today is about inflation, where they're telling people, "Oh, we can expect this to happen," right? But no one wants to put
It's
one and one
normal.
together. Every time they print a bunch of money and then send it to a foreign country, well, you see this massive spike in inflation, right? And then when they don't do it, it settles, right? It kind of just slows down. You can't just print money, have more of it in circulation, have less goods, and expect no inflation. It just doesn't make sense. You've made everything more rare,
hmm And I
right?
want everyone that's listening. This Wealth Wednesday, we're doing a special conversation today, exclusive conversation with Demetrios. Not going to be a full-on presentation, but we're going to be talking about inflation and just sort of the current state of the economy in Canada. Demetrios is kind of getting into that, and really, if you listen to some of these old school economists, like I'm trying to think of some names here. I know there's one gentleman. There's a speech. Maybe I'll find it. There's a speech he made. He said that inflation is made in Washington, and if they try to blame inflation on anyone else, they're lying because no one else can print money like Washington can. And sometimes we see rise in prices, and we blame it on inflation, even if it's sort of caused by supply and demand shifting. But when it is, it's because of the currency supply. There's only one place to look, and that's at who's increasing the currency supply. So that's what we're talking about today. And we got some charts and some statistics to look at. So we'll dive right in. Go ahead and continue, Demetrios.
Yeah, just saying. I think there's also a common misconception of what the economy is as well, right? And I think that's where people start misunderstanding how inflation is I guess comes to fruition, right? And then as you were saying, no one really prints money quite like Washington, right? And people get the misconception where the economy means people sitting at where are they? The bureaucrats, basically, people with wealth, right? That's not the economy, though. The economy is, blue collar people going to work, businessmen who run their own businesses, get up every morning and go out there and promote their, let's say, their construction company, and do some renovations for people, do some landscaping for people. That's the economy, right? So it makes it go around.
Yeah. And there's a shift from that. That used to be, there used to be guys in the coal mines, and they had the tools, they had the hammer, they're running away. Now it's all machines. And we're gonna get more automized, more AI. It's gonna kind of get away from human input, elbow grease. And that's something that we're not really used to. But if we look back to, the days when if you wanted to wash your clothes, you had to go down to the river with what's it called?
Oh, like a cheese
Uh,
grater.
it looks like a cheese grater. That's
Yeah,
right. What
I don't
I
know
don't
what
even
it
know
would
what
be
it's called,
called.
but I've never used one. You beat the clothes up and whatnot.
Yeah,
And then they came out with all the machines. Ovens, microwaves, dishwashers, and washing machines. That was in the 20th century. I don't know when. I think it was halfway through,
oh, I
maybe a
love
bit
where you're going with
earlier.
it. Love where you're
That
going.
Yeah, you like where we're going with this? That was sort of
Yeah,
the beginning of, hey, machines will make your life easier. That gave people more time. There was this new product, maybe General Electric and maybe one or two other companies, and it was we look at the price of them too. I'm sure the
yeah.
price was sort of for the rich people, and then it became, now it's like,
Hmm.
maybe a couple $100 you go buy one, and then
Right.
they don't last as long, they're built cheaper. But that was like, we've never had that in human history before. Boom, we have this new
The
thing,
Industrial Revolution, right?
the industrial revolution. Now we're getting into another industrial
I,
revolution. It's going to look totally different.
I was, and I'm going to argue that the Industrial Revolution was actually a bad thing,
Oh, it's not all good, but
Right. Because
we're
that's when
talking about
children labor was
inflation.
introduced as well, right? We had to fight against child labor to after the inception of the Industrial Revolution. Kids were
Okay.
used as pawns basically to fit into small areas where adults couldn't. Right, lots of kids
Whoa.
were getting injured, getting killed, right, not being paid like adults were, right. It was a rough time. The Industrial Revolution wasn't exactly a good thing.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize that. I didn't know about the children. I
Oh,
know
you
it
know about
wasn't all.
the women's rights movement that came about from the Industrial Revolution
Yep,
because they put
of
a big
course.
gap now between men and women. And
Mhm.
also, we had to fight for children's rights, right? Unions came about because of that. Now, since then, the unions have been useless. There's the law that kind of protects people now, but in some fields, like I think in construction, the union is necessary because the law is not very specific for construction and stuff like that. So you need a union. Police need a union as well because the law again doesn't protect cops. The law, right? Just because you're a
Mhm.
cop, it doesn't mean you can go and just open fire on anybody. So you need a union, right? You need someone that's going to protect you should something happen, right? That no one's around to witness or there's a debate, right? So
Yeah, you can't have sovereign police and have them be above the law. That's the idea. It's not always that way. But yeah, the Industrial Revolution was something that was able to offset inflation. There's more
right.
goods. Sorry, there's more currency chasing fewer goods. That's the main issue of inflation, an abundance of currency and the scarcity of products. But now you have machines that allow you to produce products, and there's new industries
Which means
that
less
kind of can
people on the
catch up.
floor, which means less people on the floor, less people
Yep.
getting less families taking home an income. So anytime you take money away from someone to give money to someone else, you've now given an incentive to both parties not to work.
And we can talk about universal basic index as well. I'm going to share my screen in a second here. I'll
Sure.
share, I see the automation. Um, this is something that I don't know if I could pull up a graph or anything, but this vision of the future, and I'm sure you do as well. And I go to Walmart and I really want to go to the checkout with the humans and not the
Mhm.
machines, right?
Right.
But when there's a big lineup and I'm waiting there 10, 15, 20 minutes and I'm looking and there's an empty nothing there for the
Self checkup.
self checkout, and I got one or two items. I go to the self checkout and I'm like, is this just what it's going to be now? The cost of upfront putting in the machines is going to be less than paying the employee. The employee is going to actually cost more in the future. Then what happens to these people? I
I
mean,
wouldn't be too worried about it. Just
how
because
come?
it's a vicious cycle that it's just inevitable to repeat itself. It always gets uglier before it gets better, mind you. But uh, totalitarianism can be looked at in a micro scale in a company. So when the guy at the top is willing to fire everyone beneath him to replace them with something autonomous, right? Something that's going to minimize how much money he's forking out every year to somebody else, right? Eventually it's going to come crashing down. It always does. Always. Can't rule absolutely, right?
It worries me because then I'm thinking, what are these people gonna do? Like I worked at a drugstore when I was in high school, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have like a certain skill. And a lot of immigrants come and they work at Walmart and then they move on somewhere else. And that's sort of bridging the gap to go
Mm-hmm.
on to other things. If that's not an option, where are they going to go to do that? And
They have to.
how can they learn that skill? You know what I mean?
So that's something I had to learn because I was going on YouTube. So I'm going to be careful with what I say. But I grew up in poverty, and
Mhm.
there was a bit of a trick to get myself out of poverty. And the trick was is that you can't work a job like Walmart and expect to get out of poverty. Do you get what I'm
No.
saying? Can't work a job like Tim, because I worked at Tim Hortons, I worked at Canadian Tire, I worked at Future Shop. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I had pretty good positions in these companies. Not like, like I was just a guy on the floor, right? But they're not positions where I aspire to be today. Yes.
I get that. But you needed that to make some money, learn those skills to go to the next step. Would you say that?
I needed to learn what I was capable of doing so I can put what I knew I was able to do on a paper.
Mhm.
The resume is more important than where you actually worked. If you're able to communicate what you're capable of doing in a way where it's very easy and very comforting to somebody to read it, say, this guy knows what he's talking about. Look how efficiently he explained to me on a resume, which limited space, and how much wealth of experience this person has, right? And I see Walmart here. Wow, this guy did incredible work at Walmart, right? The title, because I used to hire people. I was a warehouse manager, so I didn't really care where they were coming from. I looked at what they were able to do,
Mhm.
right? If you're able to communicate to me that you're able to do a lot, I don't care where you worked. You did a lot. Where you were, you did a lot. I see it. Doesn't matter where you did a lot. Fact is, you did a lot, right? And you know how to do
Mhm.
a lot. So that I value that, and that's how I based my hiring. And I was fortunate that that's how people were basing their hiring too. I remember getting my first warehouse job. Never worked in a warehouse, never
Mhm.
driven a truck, and I was delivering tires. I didn't even know what tire sizes looked like,
You
right?
had to learn that.
I didn't know how to measure the tread of a tire. I didn't know what a damaged rim looked like compared to a new rim, right? That's how ignorant I was at like 19, 20 years old. Right? I didn't know what the difference between a new and a used rim looked like, right? But by the end of it, I was a warehouse manager.
Beautiful.
It all just came from being able to communicate what I'm capable of. That's it.
And that's sort of part of what the American dream used to be. And I don't know if we really had that in Canada, but I was here, my parents, grandparents talk about the American dream, and it was sort of coming to this country or the US, working some of these jobs, learning experience,
Mhm.
building up, becoming a better person, and then getting to the point where you are, where you could buy a house, have a family, and do all those things. And any of those little material things you get is just really in service of having you live the life you want, be the best version of yourself. And that's becoming harder and harder.
It is. The
And
opportunities are fewer and further apart. That's the problem.
mhm. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. First thing that we're going to dive into, pensions. We'll talk about pensions for a couple minutes here. Um, the main way that pensions work is you're investing money into a pool, and people that are younger that are paying in are funding the people that are older. And then you have that investment sort of picking up a little bit of slack. When we look at the ratio of people entering the workforce to leaving the workforce, I don't know if I found exact ratio. It doesn't seem to be easy to find this, but when we do look at, let me see here, people that are coming working age or leaving working age, there are those that are in retirement age.
Mhm.
We used to have in 1950 8.2 to 1. Sorry, 8.2 to 1 ratio. And
Wow.
this is sort of not even the baby boomers. I'm thinking the war is over. This might start being the baby boomer generation. And
They
so
were
running
eager
a
to work.
pension, yeah, and running a pension would have been easy. You had all these young people getting into the workforce, producing things, and
Mhm.
starting new industries. All this entrepreneurship coming into play, and then 8.2 of them in the working force compared to one person in retirement. That pension would be easy. The payment from younger people would be lower because there's more of them. You compare that to today, 3.7 to 1. That's way different. and then we have this crazy inflation rate. So everyone that's it's working is going to have to pay a little bit more. And I don't have it ready for today, but I think we'll look into Canada Pension Plan another time. As we know, do invest in private equities. They do have deals with companies, things that the average person can't just go and invest in. They do a pretty good job. Canada Pension Plan is pretty good with how they manage the money and manage the funds. But if this number keeps going down, we're looking at birth rates just dropping. People are not having kids anymore. They used to have big families.
Yeah, there's no
My
incentive
dad's mom.
anymore. It's not cool to be a dad a dad and a mom. It's cooler to be a single dad or a single mom nowadays.
Marriages are breaking down. Divorce rates are high. And my dad grew up with, I think, 12 or 13 brothers and sisters, to the point where if I tried to name them all right now, I'm like, I haven't seen some of the sisters.
You'd be offending.
Yeah, honestly, that's like Newfoundland. That's kind of what they did. Just huge family. My mom had a brother and a sister. So, she's Italian. They kind of did things a little bit different. It was later on. She's younger. And then I look at now, and it's like 3 kids is big, whereas before it was small. You know what I mean?
Can I add something there though?
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't, at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but this is like, me personally, I think there's numbers to support this. There's no conspiracy behind it. But in every culture nowadays, you have population control. You don't want your population going out of whack. I would make the same argument that in a way we have an unspoken and undeclared form of population control here, in terms of not allowing families to have more than 2-3 kids at a time. The argument is this: by the time anybody is financially stable, to put forth the effort to start bringing kids into life, they have to wait till they're at least in the mid-30s. That's how it works.
And that's late.
That's late. Biological clock is already ticked away. Now, that's one form. The second form is cesarean surgeries to, get the baby out. After your second cesarean, the third pregnancy becomes a high-risk pregnancy, and so on and so forth. Every pregnancy after your second cesarean is harder and harder and harder. They don't recommend it. So you're kind of having a cesarean, you're kind of limited to like 2-3 kids, right? To begin with. So you're not going to have 13 cesarean surgeries, that's for sure, right? Like at that point, you're I don't want to say it, but Islam probably has a right. Could have many wives, right?
That's what they used to do, because men can have children, I think, any age, very very late.
Yeah.
My dad is, I think, 8 years older than my mom, so that's what happened there. But like you said, like we used to get married at what, 20 years old, have kids early 20s. Now it's like I have friends, they just had their kid turn 1 and they're in their early 20s, and it's like, whoa, is it an accident? That's the first thing people think. It's not socially acceptable anymore.
Right.
Whereas, you're 35, you have a kid, that used to be like, oh, you waited, what happened? Now it's like, okay, that's normal. So all those social norms have kind of changed, and a big driving factor is money. Obviously, I mean, I read the other day, I don't know how accurate it was. It said raising a kid can cost like $300,000 per kid.
Yeah.
Over raising them till they leave, which used to be
that's
like
in US
18.
Bucks,
as US. It used to be like 18. Now it's kind of like 22, 23.
Yeah,
So
they don't leave anymore, the kids.
yeah, exactly. They're just they're kind of there. They're kind of still dependent. So do people want to be putting something out in the world and punishing themselves? That's how they view it, with having to pay all that money, or do they want to go and live their life and whatnot? So we're seeing that this number probably going to come down. But in Canada, I think if you look at population, which we'll in a minute, still going up, because we have immigration. So that's where we're getting some of these younger working age people from, instead of from the birth rates. But then are those people going to have kids or not? I don't know. Cultures are
I
different. We'll see.
I think so. I
I
mean,
think,
it's the only part that I don't have a problem with mass migration is the fact that our culture as Canadians, we don't have too many kids, but other cultures they love having kids. So we kind of need that in this country. You know what I mean? We need. I don't care how we get it, but we need more family oriented people.
yeah. And I think, I haven't traveled a whole lot, but I think if you go out to the east side of the world, it would be similar to the West 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And they'll be having kids and doing whatnot. They come here and they're like, these people are a little weird, but we like it
Well,
here. We'll stay.
it's different because I did a lot. So my wife and I went to Thailand for our honeymoon, right? And while we
Nice.
were down there, just rented a moped and just drove around. And quite literally, we knew nobody, but we met so many people, like incredible people. And I think it's not far fetched to think that someone that's family oriented, living in a country that's very family oriented, like we weren't in Bangkok, we weren't in like downtown, like the big part. We were in small province of Phuket. It's very quiet, touristy, right? But there's a lot of family activity going on there. Right? It's very family oriented. So it's not hard to imagine that those people are just kind and outgoing in that sense to greet tourists with open arms like that, because they're used to being, well, to get married, you have to be at some threshold of kind, right? You're meshing your life with somebody else's life, right? And they're meshing their life with yours. So both parties have to be willing to be kind to each other to some degree, right? And I think that translates outside the home too. You're more willing to be like, hey, come on in, we'll house you. And it's more than just trying to get away from the kids, right? As much as I'm 11 months in, I would love a break, a nice vacation with my wife right now, right? But at the same time, it's also nice to have friends over, right? Like having people over. It's more, it hits me different. Now that I'm married with a child, it hits me different. I feel more appreciated when people come over. You know what I mean?
Nice. Mhm.
So speaking from experience, if more people were more family oriented, maybe we'd be more open arms with each other. Like, hey, come in, bring it in. You know what I mean? Like they are in other countries.
Yeah, yeah. Used to have like barbecues and cookouts with the neighbors. Now it's kind of like, do you know your neighbor's name? Not really. But
Yeah,
we'll dive into inflation here. I don't want to be.
sure.
I'm looking at time. We've been chatting a little bit, um, which is great. Looking at inflation, we look at inflation numbers. We're looking at numbers that the government gives us. So if they're causing inflation, if they can say, hey, it's 8.1% when really it's like over 10, but we say 8.1, a little bit better for them. It's done through the consumer price index. And that's a basket of goods that they look at the price of that basket year to year or month to month, but they change what's in the basket. So they're able to, I don't think that's the right page. Here we go. So they're able to actually look at food and have food take up a different percentage of the basket year to year, shelter. So this changes instead of looking at the exact same thing. So when it comes to food, one year you might be looking at steak, the next year you're looking at chicken. It's not I don't think it's a very reliable way of representing the increase in prices. And when you look at the prices of food in the grocery store and then you're looking at the CPI, you're kind of like, this doesn't really make sense. But if we look here, they change the percentage of the CPI that's restaurants, grocery stores. There's one thing I was looking at, transportation. Private transportation kind of went down. Are people using less private transportation, or is gas so expensive that they're saying, you know what, let's put in more public transportation? But then I look at public transportation, it's gone down as well. People weren't really traveling through 2020 as much. This stuff really does change. They add new sections. So not the most reliable thing. They added recreational cannabis. That's a big expense for people, I guess. They added that in here the
Mind-boggling.
last couple of years. Was it?
I'm saying it's mind-boggling because it's like they're very. I could see after seeing this now, it's very inconsistent.
It's inconsistent. Not huge fluctuations. They have the video games in there too. So air transportation went down through the pandemic as well. And then we have this company. I don't know if you've heard of these people, Shadow Statistics. Are you familiar, Demetrios?
Yep.
Yeah. So in the States, they have their own CPI, sort of separate from Canada. They measure inflation. And Shadow Statistics has gone through with a different system. I'm not going to say it's better or worse, just a different way of looking at inflation. And their way of measuring it, they say it's more reliable and it's double what the government says it is. The trends are similar, right? But it's double. And we have to remember that the inflation rate, like interest in your account, it'll compound. It gets further and further away from you, and you kind of have to chase after it. So that just begs the question, like, which way is accurate? So if any given year they're saying, hey, inflation's at 2%, 3%, it's not too bad. Is it really at 4, 5, 6%? That's a little more worried for sure. Couldn't find Shadow Statistics. I couldn't find it on Canada. But I wanted to look at the value of Canadian notes in circulation. I don't know if you knew there's a $1,000 note, but
Yeah.
just between 2018, 2019, 2020, didn't find 2021, 2022. They're printing a whole lot of money. And I remember seeing in the States, they had printed more money than actually existed ever before and just sort of doubled the currency supply. And then currency circulation does also increase with banks lending and having reserves and just lending out money and multiplying that factor. So this is sort of worrisome when we're looking at inflation, this big increase all of a sudden, if we're not going to be able to chase after it. The United States, very similar trend to Canada through the last couple of years. It does look like it might be tapering off here. Shadow Statistics is going to have something else. We don't know what to rely on. Those are the official numbers. And then this is currency in circulation for the US as well. And I believe this one didn't really go as far. This one didn't go up to 2022, but you can see that curve, it compounds. And then the increase is just so rapid, where you look in the 70s from one year to the next, it was a little increase. And now it's just getting a little crazy. There's so much money out there. And that, couple percentage points is doing a whole lot. And then when we're looking at the gold standard, we've talked a lot about currency, fiat currency, gold standard. History of the gold standard is interesting. We're probably going to dive into it a little bit more on another week. But 1971 was a big year. President Nixon, Tricky Dick, they call him, he stopped the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. So he took the US dollar off the gold back because it used to be at a fixed price, $35 per ounce. So if you looked at a chart, it'd be just around $35 for an ounce of gold. I'd love to pay $35 for an ounce of gold today. And if we look at gold on a chart here, used to be at 35. After 1971, it's not showing up on the chart, but 1971, it just started to go up. First, it wasn't too crazy. It got away a little bit. Then we had these big spikes. And over time, it's now gotten to the point where gold is just not comparable to the US dollar. They're no longer comparable. Good thing, bad thing. There's pros and cons for sure. But now we have a currency supply that is just sort of made up. We have private banks controlling the reserve, controlling the currency supply. And most people don't really understand how it works. But we see through certain times, certain key points in time, that the price of gold will kind of increase a little bit more. So if we look back here, 1977, this is the US dollar, by the way. So gold to the US dollar, 1977 into 1981. That was the first time where gold really took this leap away from that $35 of what it used to be before the 70s. And then it came back down. And if you bought gold at that time, I mean, you're not breaking even until over 20 years later, which is kind of insane. So that's why people really, I find if right now is sort of a time where we see, I don't know if you've seen it, I've seen advertisements to buy gold on TV and online. Have you seen those?
Yeah, for the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people buy gold at the wrong time because, I mean, do you know what was going on in the States, 1977 to 1980, 81?
Like politically?
Yeah, that's a big factor. It was Jimmy
Yeah.
Carter.
Vietnam was just about finishing. People were not happy about it. There was a big revolution happening in terms of people going against the government. The flower movement, was it the hippie movement was just wrapping up in late 70s.
Yeah. Hippies were like anti-war.
Mhm.
Was 1969 was Woodstock. This was like 10 years later. Things were sort of mainstream that way. But Jimmy Carter, the way that money was handled
Now
under
the
that
second
administration.
worst president in U.S. history, no longer the worst.
Second worst. I won't comment on that, but I didn't live through it. I'm looking back at it, and it seemed pretty
Not as
bad.
bad
Whole
as
lot of money
not as
spent.
bad as Joe
Things
Biden
were
is doing now, right? So Jimmy Carter he did all right. Looking back at it now,
it's similar. It's similar when you look at inflation and money being spent. And let me see, where's I think I had an inflation rate that went back that far. Let me see. Maybe I didn't pull it up, but it's replicating what's happening now to
yeah.
what happened then. Here we go. Is this this is inflation in the US. This is where we are. This is where we were. And I say we have a huge ties to the US, but
Yeah,
this is the end of the administration, 13%. And that 13%, if you look, we could pull up other markers of inflation, but 13% doesn't go away. It's not like they're burning bills. They're not going to lower the currency supply. This
right.
is very interesting to me that this came down. That's in CPI that came down, but this is felt through generations to come. This will be as well. Are we going to see this tread higher or not? I don't know. But I
have an
that's bad
interesting point
enough.
to make in 2009, right?
Yep. Go ahead.
What happened in 2009 to cause that inflation to come down?
Yeah, there's a collapse. They say it was CFDs, and the real estate market came down, and the prices of a lot of things did come down with people not buying them. And that was a slow recovery. That was a very slow recovery and a recession without printing a whole lot of money. Whereas here they printed a lot of money, and that was supposed to, get us out of a recession very quickly by kind of zapping it with the inflation and recovering quickly instead of this slow, dragged on recovery. But now we're in a recession, and we're arguing about what the definition of a recession is. As we're in it, it's sort of like we're getting shot at. We're in war. We're getting shot at. We're like, oh my gosh.
Well, maybe these aren't real bullets.
Yeah, maybe it's actually a 9mm bullet. and not a 30 odd six. Well, let's not argue about that. We're getting shy. Let's deal with that.
But maybe they're not aiming at us.
Yeah. I think the angle, they went over our heads. I think we're good.
Like I haven't gotten hit yet, right? So maybe they're not trying to hit us.
It seems pretty trivial. Seems pretty trivial. And when we've seen high inflation, we kind of relate that to low interest rates. But in the 80s, they called it the misery index. They had high inflation rates and high interest rates. Interest rates that I've never seen, like 20%.
That's how you're going to drive down inflation quick, is by trying to get back all the money that you've lost all these years fast, right? Rather than letting the index continue.
It's tricky. And anyone that's trying to, start a family, buy a house, you're looking at the prices of houses just going up. And then you go to get a mortgage, and you're going to pay 20%. Like that's
right.
And people did it. And people did that. And we wouldn't be able to do that today.
They're heroes for doing it, because if it wasn't for them, they would have never driven back down the inflation cost or the interest rates.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
I'm not a big fan of rising inflation or rising interest rates, but at the end of the day, the interest rates are high because, well, they made mistakes printing way too much money. Now they have to recall some of that money back, a certain percentage of it. So what are they going to do? Is they're going to hike up the rate on those who can afford to pay it back and get it back as soon as possible.
Yeah,
it's a crappy scenario for everyone.
It is. And I'm thinking, when we're looking at entrepreneurial spirit, a lot of businesses are started with loans. Mm-hmm. And when interest rates were just rock bottom here, it was very easy to borrow money, invest in the market, start a business. If things are like this, no one's going to want to take a loan unless they know for sure they're going to take it back. So they're not going to want to take a risk, and inflation's high. And through after, say, midway through 2020 and on, the stock market went up like crazy. Mm-hmm. Right. And I like that if I'm investing in it, sure. But it's getting unaffordable. And then we're seeing that it's overvalued, and there was no real new, there's no industrial revolution. There's no new products being made. It's just sort of inflation. That's a byproduct of inflation. What if the stock market comes down, inflation's high, and interest rates are high? That's sort of three things. Like, where do you put your money? What do you do? That's just collapse of a nation. So I'm looking back at this.
The first industrial revolution, and look for clues there, because when it first started happening, the first industrial revolution, it was really bad for a lot of people. Like, think about it. You brought in all these machines now, and you got rid of all these people. And I hate to go here, but there was a quote from an American, an African American who was a slave, who got let off, let go of their work after they were freed, and they found work, but then they were let off work because the minimum wage was introduced in America.
Oh.
And they said, well, I'd rather make, so before they were making $1.50 a day, or sorry, $3.50 a day, $3.50 a day for 15 hours of work. The minimum wage was introduced, and they were to make $1 an hour, which would mean $50 a day, right? But people couldn't afford to pay that kind of wage.
Yeah, so the companies just thin the herd.
Yeah, exactly. So what ended up happening is more people got let off, let go, than people that were able to work. So it's like people at that point were like, I'd rather work for 50 cents a day. So way less than I was originally getting paid for, right? Than to work for a dollar an hour. Right now, I know cost of things are way different. So obviously today, saying someone should work for 50 cents is awful.
It's not even the same thing. Yeah, it's like maybe $5 now, which is not a lot of money. but then we got to look, you can't just, I want people to get paid a good amount.
Yeah.
You got to look
Anything.
at all the factors. And
Yeah. I'd rather someone take home something rather than nothing. That's the point, right? Because that's something. Okay, you know what? It might not be able to get them to that to their car payment at the end of the month, but you're on your way to a car payment at the end of the month. You know what I mean? Rather than, oh no, now my car is going to be taken away. Because I can't afford gas, can't afford insurance, can't afford the payment. Like I can't even afford food, right? If you're not making anything.
I want to speak about something that you got me thinking here. Have you seen these new Sierras? Beautiful.
I have. Can I say one thing?
Yeah,
I know
I'm
you're a
going
truck
somewhere with
guy.
this. I'm not just, what's that?
Because I know you're a truck guy, and I'm
Yeah.
starting to get into trucks. And you're
Uh,
going to know a lot more about this topic than me. Old trucks. When was the last year before they started putting radios and EMTs into in trucks? Because trucks were the last ones to get all that cool stuff.
yeah, I mean, look, even like Chevy kind of had their, I'm a Chevy guy. Chevy had their sort of, they rebranded their trucks and called it a Silverado right before the 2000s. So if you look at an old body style, they were a little bit more rough, and there was lots of single cabs and
Mhm.
long boxes, whereas now everyone has a crew cab and a short box because it's sort of the family wagon, right?
Right.
I don't know if these probably had a radio or something, but there was no real niceties inside. And these were made until like the late 90s. And then they came out with like the first gen Silverado.
Yeah.
But the reason I say this is in the, say, look at the an '04 Sierra. Sorry, my bad. Let me see. They weren't, they didn't have anything that we have now, right? If you got like a
Yeah.
top trim, maybe you're paying 60,000 Canadian,
Mhm.
and you have this truck, and then now you pay a bit more, 60, 80,000 Canadian, and you get one of these, maybe not top trim, maybe a little lower down, but it's got all of these things that these don't have. They found a way to make it cheaper. And the way that they've done that is through machines that they already have invested in. The company is making money selling parts for the older trucks, right? They've been in business for long enough, but stuff isn't really made here. The percentage of this truck that's actually made
I was going to ask how many
in
layoffs
America, North
in
America.
GMC in North America the last 10 years
this
since
is the thing.
2004.
This is the thing. And these trucks, like a lot of it's made in Mexico.
Mhm.
And I hate to do it. So I look it up, and what they're paying them in Mexico is like, it sounds criminal, right?
Significantly less, right?
Oh yeah. And like and if this truck was made in Canada and the US, it'd be over 100,000. No one would be able to buy it, right? And they'd have to close down shop. And so they have these people in Mexico, and I'm thinking like, what's the wage in Mexico? Like things are different. I've never been there. I've been to Belize, and I can see cost of different. Food was cheaper. It's a whole different world. So that has me think like, if you were to interview people in a workshop in Mexico making these trucks, some of them are getting paid $4 an hour, and you ask them like, would you want us to implement minimum wage? They might say, sure, I'd love to be paid minimum wage, but would they actually be able to keep their job? Probably not. Maybe it
No,
would go more
exactly.
automized.
Asking
So
someone if they want a minimum wage, okay, is like handing them a gun and letting them shoot themselves. Okay, you literally, yeah. If you're looking to get rid of people, that's how you do it. You want a minimum wage? Okay, what you want your minimum wage to be? Like, how much do you want me to pay you minimum? $17 an hour? Perfect. Okay, let's put that in contract. Okay, contracts written by both parties. Okay, now I can't keep up with that, so I gotta let you go. You know what I mean? I can't afford
yeah,
17.
it's
That was not
sad.
discussed prior to the minimum wage going up, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's sad. And we'll finish up in 10 minutes. We'll get back into inflation. So Canada, it wasn't as bad as the States, but still it mimicked. We see late 70s, early 80s, inflation had this spike and came down, just like the US, even though they didn't have Jimmy Carter. I'm not too keen on what was going on in Canada at the time. And then we look at interest rates, and they had the same sort of spike. It was similar. It wasn't as high. It did hit 20% briefly, but what would have these two countries be very, very eye to eye? I'm not too sure, because a lot of times you can see this happening here, and then in another part of the world, things are totally different, right? So we have to
Company,
make
like you
sure
said,
we're investing globally.
you're saying there's private entities that control the CPI, right?
Yeah, so the government controls what determines the CPI through that basket of goods. The currency supply, yeah, we have the Bank of Canada here. In the States, they have the Federal Reserve. It used to be government run. Now it's disconnected from the government in a way. And the last person who tried to rein it in, sorry, the first person that tried to rein it in and have the government have more control, ended up with a hole in his head. I don't know if it's connected, but yeah, JFK. And then Donald Trump tried to do the same thing. And we see this sort of go back and forth. And now we have
Collaborated effort to silence and remove these people.
yeah, you go against the establishment. It's not good for you at all. And then I wonder, Canada, who's doing that? Is there anyone really doing that here? I don't see the same sort of thing. I don't think we printed as much money as the US, but in Canada, and then I wanted to touch about South Africa. We'll skip over this quickly, but they had a different trend line for their inflation. Late 70s, early 80s, it actually was a little lower than the US, and then hit the same amount as the US did. US hit in I'm getting mixed around here. 1980, they went up 14%. And unfortunately, South Africa, soon after, when the states had come down, they went up over 20%. And then interest rates, I don't think I pulled it up, but interest rates right now in South Africa are higher than here. And their inflation rate was lower for some time because they were doing different things. Maybe they didn't have the same response to COVID. They didn't do the same sort of thing. We talked about Canada. People aren't having kids, but populations had pretty steady growth. Like we've seen this trend pretty steady. And still less people in California. So not a huge population for such a big space. That's going up. Housing starts. This is how many houses are starting to be built. And we did okay. It's not as high as it should be, but we're not really following the trend line of population. This is new. This is a derivative of that. This isn't just houses, but this is new houses. But we're making houses. We could make more to have more supply, try to handle the price increase. That being said, a lot of that is just inflation coming and showing itself in the real estate market. A lot of people do not have a house renting, and then a lot of people are doing very well, and they have a bunch of real estate, right? Can't get mad at those people for doing what they can. We'd like to do the same thing, but it's not as easy. One thing I tried to find was a good chart of the
a little
average
easier
salary.
than you think, Matthew. It's a little easier than you think.
Yeah, man, if you go back in time, would you?
No, I'm happy
No?
the way it happened now, and I'll tell
Just
you why.
the best
There's
time.
a lot of things you have to learn, right? And the biggest thing the biggest learning curve I had to I guess overcome becoming a homeowner. The hardest part is saving the cash and finding a home you're willing to dump that cash into. That's the hardest part. Okay. Now, You make payments. I'm sure you're an adult. You have a car. I'm sure you make several payments there: gas, insurance, the actual car, right? You probably have a credit card. There's payments there, line of credit payments there. We're advisors. Start paying yourself first before you pay any of those off. What do you feel comfortable to get to your goal? How like give yourself a timeline and break it down. How much do you need to put down and then do it. That's the hardest part, is just doing it, right?
Mhm.
That's it. That's the hardest part. As soon as you're in the house, it's like you're renting again. It's just making sure the money's there every time, every that time of the month for the bank. That's it.
I get that. Yeah. And I know this is going on behind the scenes. And at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of control over this. We just have to do what we can. So make your plan your work and work your plan is what it is
That's
at the end of the day. I want to find a good chart of average salary and just show that it's not keeping up with inflation. I'm having trouble finding it.
I don't think you're gonna have to spend too much time trying to convince people they're not getting paid adequately during inflation.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And median and inflation, I'm sure, sorry, median and average, I'm sure you know this. Median and average are not the same thing. And you can't look at one or the other. It's good to look at both. Because a lot of people will, I mean, statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics, right?
Yeah.
So if we're looking at, are we looking at advisors? There's a lot of advisors, a lot of, if you're looking at insurance, for example, a lot of people are not earning a lot. You know what I mean? Maybe 40,000 is probably median. Median would be, you have all of the salaries here and you find the one that's in the middle. Average is weighted. So if you have, most people are here, right? Earning this much. And then you have those $1 million round table people, those have those high achievers. Yeah. Because that dollar amount is so much higher than this, it pulls the average this way and totally skews the numbers. So I always like to look at median and average as well, because I'm sure if you plotted all those, you'd see all these are here, and then there's a little more here, and then there's the outliers. And when the outliers are, it's 20 times the amount, it pulls the average out a little further. But yeah, so we're going through this squeeze. We're entering the fourth industrial revolution, and if you don't graduate high school and you're a male, chances are you're going to drive for a living. There's a big percentage of people that they either do trucking, delivery, Uber, something that involves driving. Not a huge skill. As long as you have a clean driving record, no DUI, you can become a driver. But now with Tesla and all these different new technologies, that seems to be becoming automated as well. And it might take some time to get there until, the truck is on the highway and you don't need someone powering it. And I'm worried about that, because all these people that's their job, are they just going to get laid off now because they don't need to be there anymore?
It's a weird industry, the trucking. So when I was driving, I learned that not a lot of people that drive a truck are licensed to drive a truck. And this causes massive delays on the highways when you see truck rollovers and stuff like this. And it's a massive issue for MTA, the Ministry of Transportation, because there are companies make a lot of money. They could easily afford someone that's, gone and got their license. Heck, they could get someone that wants the job and send them to get their license. They make that kind of money, right? Pay for the whole thing, pay for the whole training. They refuse to do it. And they just put someone that's never driven before, like a truck at least, put them with someone for a week. That person was never trained professionally or adequately. And now the new guy takes on all the bad habits of the old person, right? The one that trained them. And well, you see a few trucks rolled over on the side of the 401 there. There's a massive pile up every day.
That's crazy. I don't know. I don't like seeing them move away from private car ownership to public transportation. And I'm thinking, yeah, if we get rid of all these jobs of driving trucks, what are those people going to do? Are they, I mean, I'd love to think that they're just going to go, okay, well, let me do something else. Let me learn a new skill. But I think the solution, the new socialist answer will be universal basic income. And that's going to be just this new thing to get used to. That's going to add more inflation, decentivize work. I don't know if it can be done very well. So I don't know. That seems to be, like you said, not everyone was happy. People suffered during the first industrial revolution. So if we're gonna have another one, then we just got to be prepared and know that it's happening. Be aware of it.
Can I
It's
add
going to
one
be
thing
sooner than you
there?
think. 100%.
Most revolutions are communist revolutions. That's what usually happens. So I anytime I hear the word revolution, I have to be careful with it because yeah, as much as we need a revolution, we need to change what's happening, right? We need the right type of revolution, right? Now where we create more problems with the cure than we do with, regular problems that we've already inherited previously with our current
Yeah,
problem,
I'm thinking of Cuba when you say that. Viva la revolution.
right?
Che. I just had a friend come back from there and he's saying that, the government gets involved and if you drive a cab, you're making the same money as a doctor.
Yeah,
And he's saying a lot of people are driving cabs and I would not want to go to the doctor.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
There's a reason why the United States has the best health care. Um, they don't have the public health care and we have, universal um, health insurance here and whatnot. But there's a reason the US has the best doctors. They go there, they get paid the best, you get the best care. And if you have your own insurance and you need it, that's the best place to go. Like, there's a reason for that. The world is complex and inflation is going to be a big problem going forward. And I don't know. I want to see as many people as possible do what you're saying, like pull themselves up, get ready, do the hard work that people were doing in 1980, that misery index of inflation and interest rates. We have to be able to stomach that. Um, I hope things do get a whole lot better.
They will, Matthew. They always do. You can depend on people to be people.
That's true. That's true. All right, Demetrios, this was cool. Great conversation and a good session. I'm going to pause the recording here. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, everyone.